I got this job through an acquaintance. The pay was a pittance. But for me, a man who hadn't been able to sleep at night for 3 years, it was perfect. Guarding a warehouse outside the city. A massive concrete box filled with thousands of cardboard boxes of auto parts. Outside was an empty field and a forest across the road. The first 2 weeks were quiet. From 11 p.m. to 5 a.m., I did my rounds, drank cheap coffee from a thermos, listened to the hollow echo of my boots on the warehouse's concrete floor. There were cameras in the corners, but most had been broken for years. Only one monitor still worked, the one by the entrance. Everything else was old motion sensors that would occasionally go off because of mice. Then, on the third Friday, it started. Around 2 a.m., I was sitting in my booth by the gate. Suddenly, all 4 fluorescent lights in the main hall flickered and went out. Only the emergency red bulbs above the exits remained. I checked the fuse box. None of the breakers had tripped. A minute later, the light came back on by itself. I chalked it up to a power surge. An hour later, the motion sensor by the far wall beeped. On the monitor, I saw a red crosshair moving slowly, smoothly, not like a mouse, but like a person. It reached the field of view of the only working camera. There was nothing there, just empty concrete floor, shelving, boxes. But the sensor showed someone walking straight toward the lens. The red dot stopped 2 meters from the camera, and then the sensor went silent. It never beeped again, as if it had been ripped out along with its wires. I wasn't sleeping anymore. I drank the whole thermos. My mind drifted to thoughts I tried to push away, about the guard before me who had quit 3 days after being hired, about how, during the interview, the boss had asked me, out of nowhere, if I was afraid of the dark. On Saturday, just before dawn, I went on my scheduled round. I took my flashlight, walked down the central aisle, stopped in front of Rack Has On For, and I heard breathing. Not a loud wheeze, but a quiet, almost silent sound, but I recognized it. It was the breathing of a sleeping person. It was coming from behind the rack, from inside the wall. But behind the rack was only the outer wall, and beyond that, the field and the wind. I shone my light into the corner. No one. But when the beam swept across the floor, I saw tracks. Bare feet. Wet footprints on the cement. They came out of nowhere from the middle of the wall and ended at my feet, right in front of me. I raised the beam higher, and only then did I notice that my own breath was hanging in the air as a white cloud, even though the temperature inside the warehouse was no lower than 15 degrees Celsius. I turned around and walked back quickly. I didn't run, because something inside me whispered, if you run, it will run too. I counted my steps to the exit. 23, 22. On the 20th step, I realized I wasn't hearing only my own footsteps. Someone was walking behind me, and that someone had a very soft, damp gait, like bare heels sticking to the concrete. I froze. The footsteps behind me took one more step and froze too. I didn't turn around. I stared straight ahead at the red emergency exit light. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow on the wall, my own shadow, and another one, a shadow lower than a human's height, standing so close that it touched my shadow with its shoulder. That's when I ran. I threw the door open, burst outside, slammed it shut behind me. I spent the rest of the morning in my car with the engine running, the headlights on. The boss called at 6 a.m. and asked why the gate wasn't locked. I said, I quit. He paused and answered, got it. You're the 5th one in 6 months. Come by tomorrow for your pay. As I was driving away, dawn was breaking. I glanced in the rearview mirror. On the warehouse steps, in front of the locked door, stood a figure. Naked, pale, wet, as if just pulled from the water. I couldn't make out its face, just an emptiness where a face should be, with the suggestion of a mouth. It wasn't even looking in my direction. It was looking at the door I had left, slightly ajar in my haste. I know there was no monster there, no creature from another world. It was either a vagrant or I was losing my mind. But when I called my replacement to let him know the position was open, he interrupted me and said quietly, "You didn't touch anything by the far wall, did you?" "It's just..." The previous guy said that behind that rack there's a concrete slab that lifts up and stares. And he said he saw someone's back on those stairs. Just the back, but it was breathing. I hung up. I changed my number the same day. I don't know what was really there, and I don't want to know, because the scariest part of this story isn't the mystery. It's that every night when I close my bedroom door, I sometimes hear a soft, wet footstep in the hallway, and I never turn around. I never turn around. I work as a campus security officer at a well-known college in good old South Carolina. The job is, without a doubt, the best job I've ever had. Beautiful campus, supportive, cooperative students, friendly staff. All in all, with the exception of the occasional emergency or difficult traffic stop, it's really laid back, especially for a law enforcement job. Working for a college campus is kind of like being a town guard in Skyrim. You have your own borders to patrol, your own little town, and you know everyone, and everyone knows you. Nothing but petty thievery and drunken brawls, and certainly no bandit raids. It has a small town feel to it, and I love it. But like any small town, it has its fair share of local haunted buildings and supernatural happenings. At first, one can disregard such talk as crazy, or the students having overactive imaginations. I'm of college age, so I understand where they're coming from. Having a haunted building on campus would be wicked cool, and if you really want something to be haunted, you'll make it so with your mind alone. Next thing you know, your experiences with the paranormal spread out among the rest of the student body, starting with rumours at the CAF, then more rumours of other people's experiences, and yada yada. Eventually, boom, the place is haunted. It wasn't until I started working third shift that I realised some of these stories may be true. As you can imagine, we have a rather large lock-up list to attend to at the end of every day. About 40 buildings, each with hundreds of rooms to check, so it takes a while. Anyway, I was with my partner and we were clearing one of the larger central buildings on campus. Our campus has a curfew during the week for security purposes, so as you can imagine, students get pretty creative when it comes to hiding places. Thus we had to learn them all by checking every nook and cranny in every single room in every single building, else we could be reprimanded. We finished up having triple-checked every room. The building was empty. We double-checked every single perimeter door, and the lock-up was complete. No cars were in the parking lot. No students were anywhere nearby. We called in to dispatch that the lock-up was finished and moved on to the next building. After lock-up, I got in my patrol car and drove around as per usual, checking up on everything and making sure no one is sneaking around after curfew doing drugs or whatnot, just campo things. I got a call from dispatch that said the perimeter alarm for the central building was going off. Cue blue lights, and I meet my partner on scene. We then have to begin the painstaking process of clearing every single room on every floor all over again. When we got there, the door was opened but no one was there. We couldn't figure out who had triggered the alarm, so we figured it was a teacher who had just forgotten something in their office. The downstairs doors were still locked, so we unlocked them to go check the rooms that lined the halls below us. 4 hallways make up the downstairs in a basic square bottom floor shape. Each stretched about 50 yards or so, and each was dimly lit by emergency lighting. We cleared them one by one until we got to the last hallway. There, at the end, in the very middle of the dark hallway, was a single desk facing us. This desk had seemingly come from nowhere. Each classroom cannot be opened without a key once it's locked, and once they're cleared, they're immediately locked down. None of the downstairs doors had been open. It is 100% safe to say no one had been in there. We look at each other and slowly approach the desk. We triple-checked each classroom, but there's just no way someone could have hidden in there and waited for us to leave to do this. The desk was staring at us, and I know that doesn't make sense, but the desk seemed to be almost occupied. And even though it was empty, I felt as if we were being watched as we approached, the eerie feeling growing stronger the closer we got. As we passed the desk, the feeling went away. Admittedly, we, 2 fully armed, trained and equipped officers, quickly left the building after we locked it again, both of us very unsettled. About 30 minutes pass. I'm on patrol again, and dispatch notifies me that the alarm is going off again. We return to the building to find it was maintenance. Admittedly relieved, we asked them what they were up to, and they were simply tending to an issue upstairs. We still had to clear every room again, per lockup regulations. We deactivated the alarm, said goodnight to the maintenance fellas, and began our 3rd lockup. The doors to downstairs hadn't been touched. We go to clear downstairs again, and the hairs on both of our necks stand up. We were seriously spooked. Neither of us wanted to go down there, but we had to. I'm certain we nearly held our breath the entire time approaching that last corner. When we rounded it, the desk had company. 2 more joined it, facing the wall. The 3rd was still staring us down. We quickly locked up and left, hoping that would be the last time we got called to that building until morning. One of my older security sites included patrolling the basement of a historical site train station. In this basement there were all the standard utility rooms, disused lavatories, with a sign saying "Beware of the Leopard," and storage spaces for offices and restaurants attached to, or operating out of the station. Most of the day, these basement hallways were completely empty, save for whichever poor guard was on the certain posting requiring hourly to 1.5 hourly patrols of the entire basement. Now, while we did all have radios and worked in a team of typically 14 people spread across a block radius, much of the space in the basement allowed transmissions to come in clearly from control or other guards. But there would be frequent issues with transmitting out to them. This made the basement especially nerve-wracking for whoever patrolled, because there was only a single means of communication to anybody else down there, and it was honestly a crapshoot. So there I was, working a graveyard shift and walking through these ridiculously long and creepy hallways that echoed in a really disorienting way. I reached the end of one of these hallways that turns into a T shape, with a couple utility rooms running along the top of the T. Directly in the middle, I hear footsteps walking around and moving objects along the floor in between groups of steps. Normally, I'd figure it to be a civil worker and get their attention so I could quickly check out if they're supposed to be there or not. But this is the night shift. The station is completely closed, and nobody is supposed to be down here. I had an earpiece on my radio, so I wasn't worried about whoever was in there hearing someone respond to my call and whispered a hail to control. The second I did this, the walking stopped, and I could feel my heart in my fucking throat as I stood there terrified. Through the crack in the bottom of the big metal door to the utility room, I saw 2 bites of shadow come through the inside light, where 2 legs stopped, showing someone standing directly on the other side of the door. But I still didn't hear any footsteps as they did so, which really shook me. Then the light on the other side of the door was switched off. I stepped back and put my back into a corner against a wall as control responded to my hail. For about 5 minutes, I kept trying to request another guard to come meet me because I thought someone was in the basement area. But because of the shitty reception, I could only hear the irritated voice of control repeating, "Go ahead," and "What is it?" Giving up, I took out my flashlight and approached the door in a fighting stance and ready to shit my pants at the drop of a hat. I knocked on the door and announced myself as security and waited. No response, of course. My other hand put the key in the doorknob, and I opened it just enough to take the key out and ready myself before flinging the door open as I quickly scanned the inside of the creepy-ass brick and mortar room. Nothing. Not a fucking thing. I flicked on the light and walked around, still keeping my back to the wall as I did, eventually finding a signal and requesting another guard. After returning to control with him and reporting what I observed, we looked through the basement camera footage and found nothing. Nobody skulking the halls at midnight, nobody going into the utility room, and nobody leaving. But you can see points in the video where the light under the door turns on, the shadow under it, and then the light turning off again as I stood there. I worked security at this college, and they had me patrol 3 inches the morning. Now, I didn't mind, and the scariest places on the campus weren't awful, but this one time I was definitely creeped out. The night before, I decided to watch The Grudge with my buddy, and that freaked me out for the rest of the day. I wake up the next morning, around 2:20 a.m., get dressed, and go to work. When I got to the campus, the dispatcher had me patrol inside a couple of the facilities. Before I even got to the first building, I was walking and kept hearing rustling in the bushes. I looked around and saw nothing, but right as I arrived to the first building, I looked down one of the walkways between 2 of the buildings and saw this tall, long-haired, dark-headed individual just standing 25 yards away from me. I began to call out to it to see if it was just some college kid, but there was no answer. Without a second thought, I grabbed my flashlight and shined it in the direction, but no one was there. I looked around for a bit, but just thought to myself, I saw a shadow. I opened the front door of the first building and checked everything like usual. Because of the size of the building, I couldn't turn the lights on from anywhere close, so I usually patrolled in the dark. That morning, nothing was out of place, and I was able to make it out in pretty good time. I would always use the elevator to get to each floor, so once I was done, I took the elevator to the ground floor, did emergency phone checks on both, and walked to my last assignment for the building. Once I finished checking the north wing of the building, I walked back to the entrance until I heard a loud bell sound come from the elevator. This noise is always rung when the elevator reaches a floor, but I previously looked at both elevators and saw they were on the ground floor already. Without looking behind me, I straight up ran to the front doors in the lobby. Once I was safely out, I flashed my light inside to check, but there was nobody there, and the elevator doors were all shut. This had never happened before. While it was creepy, I still managed to keep my composure and move on to the next task. Once I reached the other building, I did the same things as previously done with the other building. For this particular facility, it was a well-known fact that the inside makes noises. Always was creepy in the beginning, but you would get used to it. However, this morning was different. After I finish checking all of the exterior doors, I make a quick elevator phone check and begin to walk out when I heard this loud thump from upstairs. I grabbed my flashlight and started to yell out, "Hello?" multiple times, but there was no answer. At this point, I was scared out of my mind, so I make my way to the exit when I see, out of the corner of my eye, the same strange figure I saw in the walkway up top on the second floor peering down at me. The same very tall figure with long dark hair, this time with a white gown. After seeing her, I feel my teeth start to chatter and I run out of the building all the way to the security office and report my findings. My dispatcher only shrugged it off, but I still was terrified for the next couple of hours until daylight.